Racing the Sunoco Special 1966. From Daytona, Florida in February to Nassau, the Bahamas in December, a special report on Sunoco's racing successes across the country, brought to you by Sun Oil Company. Daytona International Speedway in February 1966, and the first 24-hour race in the United States. Teams of drivers alternated at the wheel for this exhausting event, properly called one of the most grueling tests for man, machine, fuels, and lubricants. Fittingly, Sunoco chose to enter racing at Daytona. World-famed American driver Roger Penske, now retired, teamed with Sunoco in this challenge to the best opposition from Europe or the United States. A stock Corvette Stingray with a 427 cubic inch Chevy engine was prepared to run in the Grand Touring category. Its competition, Porsches, Jaguars, GT350s, Cobras, the best in the world. Under Penske's management, Dick Goldstrand, George Winterstein, and Ben Moore did the driving. Sunoco research and development technicians worked closely with the team, determining in advance the manufacturer's lubricating, engine oil, and fuel requirements. The entire car receives Sunoco's lubricants and engine oil. Fuel for the 11-to-1 compression ratio power plant, the famed 260, the same available in Sunoco's revolutionary custom blending pumps. A rolling start from the back straight punched the 24-hour clock. Special race design prototypes, cars built only for racing, led into the first turns. Sunoco's racing debut off to a good start with Dick Goldstrand aboard. The Sunoco Special held its revs to 6,000, about 98 miles per hour average. The car was capable of more speed, but that limit was a safer finishing pace. A force of 2 Gs was exerted on the cars as they roared around the 31-degree banking. The right side tires and suspension took a terrific beating, a real rough test of prestige grease. The Goldstrand-Winterstein-Moore team drove according to plan. The Sunoco-powered number 6 ran first in class. Pit stops were smooth, too. The Sunoco 260 fuel stored in 50-gallon drums and gravity-fed at a gallon a second. Fuel stops averaged 1.5 minutes, and the car ran beautifully. Drivers turned on their long-distance driving lights as night descended. 15 hours of driving ahead of them. The Stingray had some trouble. In heavy night traffic, Goldstrand, trying to avoid a disastrous collision, had a minor accident, but it was limited to body damage only. The sun announced the final 6 hours of driving, and a strange-looking but mechanically perfect Sunoco Special emerged from the blackness, still first in class. As the race entered its final hours, the Penske team could look proudly on its first-place position throughout the race. The reliability of the car and the now race-proven dependability of Sunoco 260 and Sunoco lubricants. The first Corvette ever to finish a 24-hour race, the Sunoco Special made 4,600 gear shifts in 24 hours, with no sign of plug wear, and an engine ready to run another race. Goldstrand took the Sunoco Special across the finish line, a full 27 laps, 102 miles, in front of his nearest competitor. The Corvette took Grand Touring honors in an impressive display of driver skill, automotive design, and Sunoco research and product perfection. Sebring, Florida in March. The Sebring 12-hour Grand Prix of Endurance. Next major race in the international calendar. Sunoco doubled its Daytona entry. The GT class winning Stingray was teamed with an exotic, lightweight, specially modified Corvette Grand Sport. Penske's team included Dick Goldstrand, Ben Moore, George Winterstein, and Dr. Dick Thompson. Sebring's 12-hour test is regarded as difficult as Daytona's 24-hour grind because of the demanding 5.2-mile course with constant shifting and braking. Sunoco 260, race proven at Daytona, powered the twin Sunoco entry with Sunoco lubricants and engine oil, the mainstays they were at Daytona. As they lined up for the famous Le Mans running start, the Sunoco entries faced tough competition. The Corvette Grand Sport number 10 was running prototype class against the factory-supported Fords and Ferraris, developed at a cost of millions of dollars. The Daytona Stingray was opposed by other Stingrays and Porsches. So both competition and the 12 brutal hours on the tricky course promised a severe test for the Sunoco contingent. The start was a breathtaking dash where anything could happen. The hottest Ford prototype driven by Dan Gurney never got started. The Italian Ferraris grabbed the lead first. Then Ford halfway on the first lap. Dick Thompson got a good start in the 427 cubic inch Chevy-powered prototype. And so did George Winterstein in the Stingray, which he moved quickly into first in class. The battle for first overall included Dan Gurney, teammate Ken Miles, and Ferrari pilot Mike Parks. Gurney captured the lead in less than 2 hours after being down 63 cars due to his vapor lock stall at the start. No vapor lock problems for the Sunoco 260 fueled Corvette. With relative ease and driving for the distance, Winterstein and Moore put the car into a solid first in class. Goldstrand and Thompson, with their heavier car, kept well up in the standings with the more exotic, lighter weight prototypes. Sunoco research engineers were on hand throughout the race to help during pit stops. Winterstein was obviously pleased with a 427-inch Stingray as he brought it in for Moore to take over. The pair had driven the slightly modified stock Corvette more than 500 miles using Sunoco 260, the same available at any Sunoco service station pump. Moore took the car out with less than half the race to go, still in first place. Into the night they roared, almost 4 solid hours of nighttime driving over the unlit course. It was in these final hours that weaknesses showed and retirements became heavier. The Dan Gurney, Jerry Grant-driven prototype Ford still held first overall as it had from the second hour. In the Grand Touring class, traditionally a Ferrari title, the Sunoco Stingray had built up a comfortable margin of 4 laps, more than 21 miles on its nearest opponent. The crew worked with clockwork precision. The Holley carbureted 427 obviously perfectly mated to the 260 fuel. The number 10 prototype had to retire after a tangle with a smaller car in heavy traffic forced it off the course and damaged its suspension. As the checker fell precisely at the end of the 12th hour, an amazed crowd was startled to find leader Gurney pushing his car. Engine failure and disqualification for pushing his car across the line robbed Gurney of the overall victory he richly deserved. Ford teammate Miles took the honors. And in the Sunoco pit, rejoicing aplenty. Counting Daytona, the Sunoco Special had been driven a total of more than 3,200 racing miles with no trouble and 2 victories. Following its successful venture into the world-renowned long-distance racing events, Sunoco turned next to the U.S. Road Racing Championship Series in a new combination of car and driver.
Start to use them hard. They go right there. I got to pump that 3 times. We got to get some more cooling into them. That's what we got to get some more cooling into them. Otherwise, all right. I think it's like he's away from the first one. I'm not on it yet. I haven't been out there long enough to really try to get it down right.
The American debut for the new Sunoco Special Combine was the June 200-mile race at Watkins Glen, New York, where Chris Economaki talked with team manager Roger Penske.
Roger, you've brought the Sunoco Special to Watkins Glen. It's a different car than the one we saw at Sebring. Tell us about it.
Well, Chris, this is a prototype car. It's a new Lola T70 Mark II, powered by a 333 Chevrolet engine. This car weighs approximately 1,500 pounds, and it has 475 horsepower.
You've got a lot of plans for the car, have you not?
Yes, we're going to campaign it in the U.S. RRC races and also the Canadian-American Challenge Cup races at the end of this season.
You have a new driver for it, too, don't you, Roger?
Right. In this type of racing, the sprint races, we felt Mark Donahue would be a good driver. He's done a good job internationally, and we feel that he's the perfect man for the car. He's had a lot of experience on most of the courses in the United States and also in Canada, and this makes a big difference when you're driving a high-speed car such as the new Sunoco Special.
Donahue quickly established the Sunoco Special as a car to be reckoned with. His fastest practice lap time, a new record at 1:16, better than 108.9 miles per hour. That was good enough for a spot on the front row of the grid.
Yes, passing has been quite difficult in practice because the cars are all pretty even horsepower-wise and brakes-wise, so that you have to work pretty hard to get by anybody.
A grid start was used at Watkins Glen. 30 cars, mostly Lolas and McLarens, with a sprinkling of Porsches and homemade specials. The Sunoco Special, with 333 Chevy Mill carbureted by 48mm Weber downdrafts, promised to be competition from the start. The flag sent them thundering away. Uphill into the first tricky part of the course, Californian Jory Grant grabbed the lead, Donahue right behind. And that's how they stayed through the 70-mile-an-hour chicane and onto the loop leading to the back straight. The Chevy-powered 485 horsepower Lola gave Donahue about 175 miles per hour at this point. Rounding the corner onto the pit straight, Donahue pressed Grant. Grant stumbled, all Donahue needed. He roared into the lead with the Sunoco Special as they began the second lap. Trouble for Donahue. A gas filler cap opened and he skidded in his own gasoline. Mark got back in action, but he was down 6 places. Grant had to pit, so Chuck Parsons and Buck Fulp took the top spots. Donahue was rocketing in the Sunoco Special and catching up rapidly. Cannon tried to take Buzetta on the inside, and they crashed. Donahue came full tilt up the hill, blind to the trouble. Donahue barely missed a T-bone with Cannon. Gas pouring from his tanks. Sparks. Fire. Donahue was out of the car, running for the verge and rolling to put out the fire. Mark's car was completely engulfed. Other racers tried to get by the Holocaust. Donahue was safe on the sidelines, but apparently suffering some burns. The conflagration made it impossible to continue. The race was stopped. Foam trucks blanketed the Donahue Lola. It was beyond saving now. Over his protest, Donahue, with painful but not serious burns, was taken to the hospital. Cannon's car was hauled away. Neither he nor Buzetta hurt. Let's replay that accident in slow motion. Cannon, intent on catching the leader, tried to beat Buzetta to the top of the hill on the inside, but ran out of room. They locked wheels. Cannon's car heeled on its side. Buzetta was forced across the track by the collision and into the hay bales with no serious damage. Cannon fought desperately to control his careening racer. Donahue's team manager, Roger Penske, comments.
Mark, approaching the top of the hill, faced a decision that all drivers fear. Coming up over the top on a blind turn and finding a car stopped or sideways in the middle of the track. At this point, Mark is traveling approximately 125 miles an hour. His car is light. He's going through a left-hand corner, and the only thing he can do is try to decide whether to go right or left. Mark applied his brakes. The car started to slide sideways. But again, because of the great handling of these race cars and the great skill of the drivers, he was able to then straighten it out and pick the inside. But of course, there wasn't enough room, and he hit the front end of Cannon's car, and thus we had a very bad collision. Think, if he would not have been able to handle this car, he could have hit Cannon right square in the side, and there could have been a very disastrous accident. The tremendous impact of hitting Cannon's front end split the gas tank. Mark, handling the car in a wild spin, was able to keep it on the highway and bring it to a stop just as it ignited. It's amazing, though, that in this impact of 125 miles an hour hitting one of these other cars, that the fuel tanks in both cars did not ignite. Cannon's car was fitted with a new aircraft-type safety tanks, thus really saving both of the drivers and saving a very, very bad accident. Donahue was wearing the coveralls, which all drivers are made to wear. These are the flame-proof type, which kept him from burning himself. The only burns he received were minor first-degree burns. I think it's a tribute to both drivers being able to control their cars as they had. Of course, it's a shame that we have to have things like this, but where there is motor racing and where there is speed, you're probably going to always have some accidents.
Buck Fulp went on to win the Watkins Glen race and important points towards the championship. Donahue's burns were minor. He was able to race again the next weekend. Roger Penske, meantime, had contacted England for a new car. The Sunoco Special would race again. The unfortunate Watkins Glen accident didn't slow the Sunoco Special effort one watch tick. A new Lola T70 was en route from England the next day. Donahue went on to a splendidly driven victory in the USRRC race at Kent, Washington in late summer. But the team, having missed the earlier USRRC races, decided to sit out the rest and prepare for the new Canadian-American Challenge Cup Series starting in September. More than $300,000 in prize money was at stake for the six-race series. The world's very best drivers in the latest versions of the all-out racers, called Group 7 cars, were after the overall win. Penske maintained the same combination for the Bridgehampton Grand Prix in September, second race in the series. Driver, Donahue. Car, Lola T70. Engine, 333 cubic inch Chevy, 485 horsepower. Donahue displayed his calm determination in an interview with former road racing champ Bob Holbert.
Well, Bob, we're starting seventh, and we feel that our car is about the best prepared one here, and we're going to run it to finish and hope that we're way up there at the end.
The starting grid for the Bridgehampton 200 miler shaped up as one of the fastest anywhere assembled. Dan Gurney on the pole in a Ford-powered Lola. Followed by Bruce McLaren from New Zealand, former world driving champ John Surtees from England in a Lola Chevy. Behind them, McLaren's teammate Chris Amon, Mark Donahue, and that fantastic wing chaparral designed by Texan Jim Hall and driven in its debut by America's only world champ, Phil Hill. They pulled away on the pace lap to the second Can-Am race, with the series as a whole decidedly up for grabs. The Sunoco Special got caught in an unfortunate fracas at the start of the series opener in Saint-Jovite, Canada, which eliminated Donahue before he completed one lap. But as they thundered for the starter's flag at Bridgehampton, he was ready. 12,000 horsepower hot-footed it under the bridge and into tricky turn one. Dan Gurney snatched the lead. Surtees, Hill, the McLarens, and Donahue right behind. Gurney had the only clear track view as they completed lap one. The Chaparral made its move, passing Surtees to take second behind Gurney. The McLarens of Amon and McLaren next, and Donahue in fifth. Gurney was never to be bested during the entire 200-mile sprint and grabbed 9 points to tie Saint-Jovite winner Surtees for the lead. Donahue kept the Sunoco Special in contention all day, driving a steady, car-saving race to finish fifth, pick up 2 points towards the overall series title. So for the checker at Bridgehampton, the standings were McLaren 10, Amon 10, Surtees 9, Gurney 9, Hill 3, Donahue 2. The Canadian Grand Prix in Mossport Park, Canada, represented the third race in as many weekends for the Can-Am contingent. Preparation and smart driving would soon become a factor in the series victory. The Sunoco Special qualified right among the leaders, with veterans Surtees, Gurney, McLaren, and Amon still the front runners. The start was one of the most thrilling in the series, and also one of the most calamitous. A first lap spin tangled the whole field. When the dust cleared, 4 cars, including Surtees and Skip Scott, were eliminated. Underway again, Bridgehampton winner Gurney stepped to the front. The Sunoco Special sustained minor body damage, but was driven steadily by Donahue in 4th place. Then residual effects of the accident and some mid-race shunts took their toll. Donahue took advantage and shot the Sunoco Special into the lead. Donahue outdrove his competition to finish the race in first, ahead of Phil Hill and Chuck Parsons, and garnered an impressive and important victory for the Sunoco Special, and proved again that the Sunoco 260 fuel worked as well in the snappy fall temperatures of Canada as the balmy spring temperatures of Florida. Donahue's victory gave him 9 points and vaulted him into the lead at the midway point of the 6-race series. The Sunoco Special figured to be a real contender for the crown. The West Coast races next. Riverside, California, 5th of the Can-Am races. 2 weeks before at Laguna Seca on California's Monterey Peninsula, the Sunoco Special finished a respectable 4th behind the chaparrals of Hill, Hall, and Bruce McLaren. By Riverside, Penske added a 377 cubic inch Chevy engine and upped the Sunoco Special to just over 500 horsepower. Same Sunoco 260 fuel. Going into this race, the Sunoco Special was tied for 2nd with McLaren, and still within striking distance of this important Can-Am title.
Roger, you brought the Sunoco Special to Riverside with an impressive showing of 2 overall wins and 2 in the first 5 of 6 races. Are you pleased with this performance?
Well, Chris, we're very happy with it. I think Mark and the fellows have done a wonderful job. Sun Oil also has been a big help, as you know, giving us sponsorship on this car, and we hope to do real well here today. I think that the heat and the big toll that usually takes place here in the first 100 miles will certainly be the same today, and if my boy can stay in line and do the right thing, I think we'll be there at the end.
Roger, from a technical standpoint, what products have you used on your Sunoco Special, and how have they performed?
We're using their 260 fuel and their top-grade motor oil. They've been operating wonderfully. They have a special grease they've given us for high-speed purposes and high temperature for our axles, and also a special transmission oil, which has really been working wonderfully. They also provide us with technical assistance at the races, which has really been terrific.
Roger, these 200-mile events are, in reality, sprint races. Is this a good test of a product?
Certainly, Chris. I think that when you have to run 200 miles at 7,000 RPM on your engines and straining every piece of the car, it certainly is a sprint race, and only the best lubricants will hold up under these standards.
Donahue has been driving with classic control.
This kind of a race is a 200-mile sprint race, which we're going to drive just as hard as we possibly can, trying to allow the car to finish at the same time.
Bruce McLaren sprinted to the lead from the start. Jim Hall's Chaparral and John Surtees' Lola Chevy follow close behind. Donahue had a smaller, less powerful engine for the race, following carburetor problems with his larger engine during practice. Early race leader McLaren retired with a clogged fuel injection system. Jim Hall in the Chaparral and Surtees in the Lola settled into a race-long battle which was to see them change the lead 7 times. The Sunoco Special, meantime, had been edging through the pack, determined to finish in the points. Donahue's main adversary in the early laps, former U.S. road racing champ George Fulmer. By the halfway point, Donahue had beaten Fulmer and Skip Scott to move into 5th behind Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart, Surtees, and Hall. Donahue drove brilliantly and stayed close to the front. The Hall-Surtees race was torrid. Neither held the lead for any appreciable time. Stewart retired, and the Sunoco Special took 4th place. Surtees finally passed Hall with 4 laps to go and held on to win. Donahue finished 4th and earned 3 more points toward the championship. Surtees' victory tied him with Phil Hill, and the point standings look like this. Next, the Stardust Raceway in Las Vegas, Nevada for the climax. Donahue and the Sunoco Special were still within striking distance of the title. By Las Vegas in mid-November, the Sunoco Special with a 333 485 horsepower engine was ready for the showdown. And so was everyone else. Hall and Hill put the chaparrals on the pole. Chris Amon and Bruce McLaren next. Mark Donohue near the middle of the grid. The start was a thunderstorm of horsepower. Surtees capitalized on his experience and consummate skill to snatch the lead right at the start and camp there. Donohue quickly embarked on a race-long battle with his chief adversary, George Fulmer. They changed places several times before Donohue put the Sunoco Special into third. No one could touch Surtees this time. Jim Hall had to retire his chaparral. Phil Hill, co-pointed with Surtees, had his wing clipped when a bolt loosened. He ran a steady fourth, but with no chance of the overall victory. On the final laps, it was apparent that Donohue could capture second overall in the series by finishing no less than third in this race. Surtees' lead was unassailable, and he flew home to all the honors in the Can-Am Series. But Mark Donohue in the Sunoco Special caused most of the admiration as the highest-placed American finisher in the series. Second behind Surtees, former world driving champion, was no mean accomplishment, especially considering the likes of McLaren, Amon, Gurney, Hall, and Hill, all of whom finished behind Donohue. The Sunoco Special team was deservedly happy, and the car fit as new after a brutal series.
The best-placed American finishers in the Canadian American Challenge Cup Series. Driver Mark Donohue, owner Roger Penske, and the Sunoco Special. Congratulations, Mark, on a great performance.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
It's been a long series, hasn't it?
Well, it's been a long haul, but we've been fairly reliable through all of it, and I think we feel we have the best prepared car, and we've worked hard at it, and this is the result.
Well, you move alongside of Dan Gurney, Phil Hill, and former world champion John Surtees as winners of Can-Am Series events. It must be very pleasing for you.
Oh, it's quite rewarding in that aspect, yes.
What about the trials and tribulations of running in this tough series? What's the big problem?
Oh, the biggest problem is making sure that you finish the car, but still at the same time running it just about as hard as you possibly can to stay in contention during the race.
Roger, as the owner and a former driver, are the problems different for you than when you were twisting a steering wheel?
Well, Chris, you're always worried whether you're going to finish. When you're in the car, you know if something's going wrong with it, but when you're standing in the pit, you never know. I think it's a real credit to Mark and also the fellas. You know, this car's finished 5 out of the 6 races, and it's certainly a credit to the crew, and we hope to be back again next year.
On that one race you didn't finish, it was an accident at the starting line, nothing mechanical, right?
That's correct. We got in a little accident with Parnelli Jones on the starting line. We never went across the start-finish line, so actually the 5 we ran, the 5 we finished.
What about the overall plan of these events, Roger? Did you let Mark dictate the strategy, or did you have something planned beforehand in the races?
Well, basically, it was just we worked it together along with the fellows, Carl Keinhofer and Bill Scott and Norm on the mechanics, and we felt just by finishing the race, that was our first job, and then we would worry about where we placed after that. And once we were up in the series, we realized how important it was to finish, and as you know, in every race, no matter if it's in Indianapolis or where it is, you never know until the flag drops who's going to win and who's going to finish behind. So no matter where you qualify, I think it still counts in the feature, and that's always on Sunday afternoon, and we always want to be in there in the end.
Well, it's been a great season for Mark Donohue, Roger Penske, and the Sunoco Special.
The racing fraternity traditionally winds up the season in December in Nassau. A mixture of sun, fun, and racing puts just the right cap on the exhausting season. For this one, the Sunoco Special and Mark Donohue faced the formidable opposition of the Chaparral with Hap Sharp driving, Skip Scott, Peter Revson, A.J. Foyt, and Mario Andretti.
We're just going to run it as hard as we can, trying to make it finish at the same time.
Mark, there are a lot of slow, small cars in the race. You close on these at up to 80 miles an hour. Does it make it difficult for you?
Quite difficult, Chris. I was in an accident earlier this week on that very same reason or cause, The fella that I came up on real quick obviously didn't see me because at the point where he put on the brakes, I wasn't even in sight. He closed the door, and I hit him and spun, and luckily didn't do too much damage to the car. But this is going to be an even greater problem in this race because people are going to be pushing a great deal harder.
The Le Mans start was used at this season-closing classic. Donahue got a fine start in the Sunoco Special. Chaparral ran into immediate problems. Sharp finally got started, but well down in the pack. But out front, Peter Revson, Mark Donahue, and Skip Scott had no problems. It looked like a race-long dogfight among Revson, Donahue, and Scott for the lead. Early in the proceedings, Revson and Scott became 1-2. Donahue in the Sunoco Special had spun to avoid an out-of-control smaller car, lost some front-end bodywork, but stayed in third. Leader Peter Revson in the McLaren came in for his mandatory pit stop. Scott went by to take the lead. Whether you have to or not, Nassau rules specify the driver must stop the car and put both feet on the ground before he can return to racing. Revson's overlong stop put him in third as first Scott, then Donahue roared by. The Sunoco Special was now second behind Scott. Scott came in 3/4 of the way through. He was forced to add fuel, losing valuable seconds. While Scott was gassing, Donahue roared by into the lead. And team manager Penske could flash that place one sign. Scott's stop was 24 seconds. He went out in second place. Now Penske's strategy came into play. Extra capacity gas tanks had been installed especially for this 252-mile race in hopes of not losing time by fueling during the pit stop. Donahue's job was to build his lead over second place Scott. When he reached a 20-second advantage and with only 3 laps to go, Penske called in the Sunoco Special for its mandatory stop. And it was a winger, in and out in just 7 seconds. But Scott had gotten by before Donahue could regain the course. Donahue had less than 2 laps to cut down Scott before the finish flag. Then Scott had trouble. He tried to hip on the inside of a smaller car and spun. And Donahue roared by. The chase was really on. Donahue flashed into the final lap with a 4-second margin. And Scott's crew urged him on. Get Donahue. Only a few hundred yards remain. And the Sunoco Special took the checker just 4 seconds in front of Skip Scott. A tremendous victory. Into victory lane again for the Sunoco Special. The 4th time this year, and a fitting salute to the Sunoco Fuel and Lubricants, which helped make such an illustrious record possible.
Congratulations, Mark.
Well, thanks a lot,
Quite
Chris.
a drive.
Well, thanks a lot. We owe our fortune to Roger's good thinking on that gas situation. I think that's the only thing that saved us after an unfortunate situation in the beginning.
What was that situation, Mark?
Well, we got a couple of people crossing back and forth, and I had to dive to the woods to avoid a Porsche and some of the car. It wasn't their fault. It was just that, you know, we were crowding it too much, and there was nothing I could do. I hit a tree, and, you know, I was just lucky I didn't bend anything up.
What about the strategy itself, Mark? Did you plan it this way?
Yes, we planned. Roger's idea was to run the whole thing without a gas stop. and it seemed that it paid off in the long run.
What about that last lap, Mark? Did you have to overhaul Skip Scott?
No, Skip Scott spun out in the back somewhere, and I got by him.
What about the chaparral?
Chaparral is out on the back straight. It looks like it went through a couple of trees. It's a little bent up, but it's not too serious.
Well, it's a great day for you, Mark. We want to congratulate you again for winning the Nassau Trophy.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Sunoco's first year in racing proved without a doubt the reliability and highest standard of excellence of Sunoco lubricants and fuels. The flashing blue Sunoco Special made an indelible mark on racing experts from Daytona to Nassau and earned the unqualified respect of the best in the world. This has been a special report on Racing the Sunoco Special, brought to you by the Sun Oil Company.